welcome to the Crochet Show with your host, Nikki. Today, we're going to talk about 5 tips or features about how to crochet with worsted weighted yarn. If you ever wanted to know a little bit about it, this is the place where you're going to learn about it and also see yarn types and what is out there. There's different features of them, what kind of patterns you can use with them. So excited. So we're going to get right into number 1. Let's define worsted weighted yarn. What in the world is worsted weighted yarn? Well, worsted weighted yarn is also known as medium yarn, number 4 yarn, or 10 to 12 ply. It depends on which country you live in. Sometimes people just say worsted weighted yarn, even Aran, A-R-A-N. Aran, I think I'm pronouncing this correctly, is another word for it. So there's many different ways how you can say that. You can even figure it out by wrapping it. You know, it's called wrap per inch. So you can wrap it around like a ruler and see how many wraps can you do within an inch. That's another way to determine what yarn you're using. Worsted weighted yarn has a certain number, I believe is 9 through 11, depending on what yarn type and how it's spun, right? So that's where worsted weighted yarn falls into. That is the most common yarn you can find, okay? There's another common one, which is like fingering weight. A lot of people love fingering weight when it comes to cardigans or something. So worsted weighted yarn, although, is really the most popular because it's so versatile. You can use it for toys and blankets, but you can also use it for wearables. It's so versatile. You can use it for so many different things. All right. So then, of course, we also want to talk about the next part. And the next part is Z versus S twisted yarn, S versus Z twisted yarn. So this is like a debate that's going around. Have you noticed? I kind of started that debate. I posted a video on multiple different platforms and people are kind of astonished. And it's like, what? There's different types of yarn? Like the way they're spun? Like what? Okay, let me show you. So this right here is S twisted yarn, okay? So S twisted yarn looks like an S. So if you would write an S right over, it would look like an S, right? And then right here, this is Z twisted yarn. So look at how it's spun. It would look like a Z, right? So there's two different types of twists. S versus Z. Now, S was created first. The S twisted yarn was created first. It was created for right-handed knitters. Knitting has been around for a long time, and most people are right-handed. And let's not go back hundreds of years, but during that period of time, left-handed was not very accepted, etc., right? So it was created for right-handed people because they wanted to make sure that it doesn't untwist when you knit with it. Well, believe it or not, crochet kind of, because of the movement of the hook and how you yarn over, this would be slightly different with yarn under, but with yarn over, you're actually untwisting, as a right-handed person, untwisting this twist. Unless it is super twisted, there's certain yarns that are not very tightly twisted, so they're a lot of people don't say, oh my God, that yarn splits all the time. Well, it's because it is not tightly spun and it's, of course, S-twisted yarn. So if you're right-handed and you have splitting yarn, it is very likely that it's S-twisted yarn. 98, probably 99% of the yarn, maybe even more, is S-twisted yarn, okay? So how do you compensate for that? Well, you can literally just deal with it. Most of the time, that's what just happens, right? Or you don't buy the yarn that's loosely twisted. You buy the yarn that's more tightly twisted, has a little bit more friction to it, right? Like cotton, for example. This is cotton yarn right here, in case you're curious. And this right here is Z-twisted yarn. Z-twisted yarn goes with the twist of the crochet hook. Therefore, you're going with it instead of against the twist, which means you're actually making the twist tighter versus looser, and therefore your yarn doesn't split. Now, The problem is for lefties, it's exactly the opposite. Okay, so lefties love S-twisted yarn when it comes to crocheting. They do not like Z-twisted yarn. Now for knitting, the entire thing is opposite, as I just mentioned. So whatever righties love, lefties usually don't. It's just because of the way we twist things. It's really, really interesting, okay? So now does that mean right-handed people cannot use S-twisted yarn and vice versa? No. You just pick the yarn, whatever you prefer. And if you feel like the yarn twists too much, well, then you're probably going to substitute out. That doesn't mean you have to use Z-twisted yarn all the time. In fact, it's so rare to find Z-twisted yarn. I wouldn't even deal with it unless you absolutely love it so much that that's all you want to do with it the entire time. Okay, so these are the two different things. I love the idea that there's two different types. I love the idea of spinning things and the science behind it and how the twist really either, you know, makes it tighter or makes it looser depending on how you wrap it around a tool. In this case, it would be either a knitting needle or it would be a crochet hook. It's really, really interesting. So let's hop right into the next one. The next one is best hook sizes. That's one of those debates that a lot of people talk about. What hook size should you be using when you use worsted weighted yarn? Well, there's a lot of different factors, and you have a range. You could actually use any hook size you wish. Literally, you could use a teeny tiny one if you wished. But it may be harder to do because you may actually literally split the yarn because the hook is too tiny, or if you use a gigantic one, you would have gigantic gaps. So a range for hooks could be between like 4, maybe even 3.5 to 6.5 or 7 millimeters. That's usually the range that people use. For me, it depends on which worsted weighted yarn I'm using and what quality it is. Meaning, what is the fiber? Am I using cotton? Am I using wool? Am I using acrylic? What am I using? And that's kind of how I depend on, and what is the actual yarn? You know, there can be different types of acrylic yarn. It could be blends. For me, I have a favorite for certain types of yarn, and I'm just used to sticking with that, right? So for me, I like to use 4 millimeter hooks a lot, or 4.5 or 5 millimeter. It depends, right? There's another big thing you have to think about when it comes to crochet hooks and which size you're going to pick for that specific yarn. It is also important to think about your tension. Some people have a looser tension. Some people have a tighter tension, which is so important when you think about gauge, right? This is why people say go up in hook size, go down in hook size when you don't reach the gauge. So do you have to use the exact hook that some other people are using for a specific pattern? No, you just it just depends on your tension, right? You just adjust accordingly and just make yourself happy, right? That's all that matters. As long as you get to the measurements, you're good to go, no matter which hook size and which yarn you're picking. So that is super duper important, right? So the next thing would be, how do I even use worsted weighted yarn? Like literally, for what would I use worsted weighted yarn for? Well, it is such a common and well-loved yarn type or weight that you can literally use it for anything. There is millions of patterns out there for blankets, hats, scarves, toys, or home decor, or cardigans, or tops. You can literally use it for anything. Now, I would recommend thinking about what type of worsted weighted yarn, meaning what fiber. Are you using cotton yarn? It's probably best to use it for anything that can get wet, like washcloths or grocery bags, or anything similar to that is okay to put water onto, and it's not going to ruin the sizing of that specific item, right? And then you want to think about what would you use acrylic for? Acrylic is for pretty much anything, right? Acrylic is that all-purpose yarn, like some people like to call it. You can use it for anything, right? The only thing you can't use it for is anything water related. It's not going to suck it up or anything. It can also melt in the sun. So just something to think about with acrylic. It is not a natural fiber. It is a human-made fiber. So you want to think about that, right? But otherwise, you can pretty much use it for anything. Wool, on the other hand, has its own little things. You don't want to have too much heat on that one, right? Because it can felt up, it can really like change its texture. But wool's also something that keeps you warm, right? So it's great for hats, scarves, cardigans, tops, etc. You can use blends. There's so many different ways, and I actually even have some patterns that I want to show you that you can use. So for example, here I have a washcloth, this one right here. So the washcloth right here that is featured uses Dishy yarn, which is 100% cotton yarn, and linked crochet. This is my linked crochet washcloth. It's a free crochet pattern. You can find it at the link in the description. And it's super fun, and it actually has kind of a wavy texture. It's absolutely stunning, and I used worsted weighted yarn for that one. Then we have the chroma hat, which absolutely was loved all around. I mean, when I published this was like, oh my gosh, I want this so bad. And we're like in summer, so you want to start thinking about fall, right? Because certain items take a little longer, although hats really don't take long, but they're super fun to make. So this one is a really, really fun pattern, and it also uses worsted weighted yarn. And then right here we have a diamond, I call it the diamond top because it has diamond shapes of filet crochet on there, and it also uses worsted weighted yarn. It is acrylic yarn. I would probably recommend wool for this if you don't want to sweat too much and you actually kind of want a little bit more breathing. I probably even would use a blend of wool and cotton. There's a lot of cool wool cotton blends out there. That is the best one if you want to stay cool or warm depending on where you go with this one. Really, really, really beautiful. Number 5, okay, is worsted weighted yarn examples. So let's talk about the examples. So here are some examples, okay? So I talked about Dishy yarn already. There's different types of Dishy yarn. It is the most affordable cotton yarn, super soft, and it's my all-time favorite yarn. Literally, I absolutely love this yarn. So this is super, super fun to use. It is super soft, it doesn't split. It's just so easy to use. Absolutely love it. I use it like all the time. So many of my patterns have Dishy yarn. It comes also in multi-colors. So here's an example for multicolor right here, and they also have a twist version, right, where it's two colors spun together. So that's another version. They have 3 different versions of this. Then also over here, so these are both We Crochet right here, Brava yarn and Dishy. I have a link in the description. If you go there and then scroll down, you will find all the information and even the yarn links and everything. So Brava yarn is also one of my favorites. There's another one, it's called Mighty Stitch, very much related, but it's a blend of acrylic and cotton. And no, acrylic and wool. I apologize. Acrylic and wool. This one is 100% acrylic. Super, super fun to use. I absolutely love it. And it's really one of my versatile go-to yarns. And I use it all the time, especially in like the fall or winter. Now, this one is a really, really fun one. And yes, this is Z-twisted yarn. So these two are S-twisted yarn. This is Z-twisted yarn. This is one of the few Z-twisted yarns that are still available. Lime Brand used to have one. They discontinued it because not a lot of people know about Z-twisted yarn, therefore they're not buying it, or they don't know what that even means. So Z-twisted yarn, also known as crocheters yarn, but again, remember that would be right-handed crocheters, right? So this is a really, really fun yarn to use. This one, I believe, if my memory is right, is 100% wool. No, it's not 100% wool. It's 50% wool and 50% nylon. So it's really fun to use. I love this yarn. It's really, really easy to use. And again, as I said, if you're right-handed crocheter, this will not untwist at all. And it actually makes it nice and tight. And the definition of that yarn is something that if you've never worked with Z-twisted yarn and you will start using Z-twisted yarn, you will suddenly be so astonished about the stitch definition that you're getting with this yarn, because you're going with the twist, it makes it beautiful, like absolutely stunning on how the stitches look like. Like the yarn just looks like it's a perfect, it's almost like a drawing. It's like so gorgeous. I mean, I just love it. So it looks very similar to using cotton yarn actually, which is really, really amazing. So absolutely love these three. One of my favorites, one of my best and favorite Z twisted yarn. As I said, I don't know many Z twisted yarns out there. This one is a very affordable one. They also have a DK version. Again, this is acrylic and this is 100% cotton yarn. So those are the ones I absolutely love and adore. So if you want to know more about yarn, crocheting, more details, like really detailed, then you're going to need to jump into the Crochet Club, which is my membership, and where I go into even more detail and talk about everything you really want to know. This is kind of an overview. If you want more definitions, more details, then the membership is where you want to be. And I hope you have a beautiful day. I'll see you next time. And again, remember, you're an amazing crocheter and you deserve the best. So that is why I make all these video tutorials and patterns for you, because I love serving you with the patterns and tutorials that you're really looking for. If you want to request patterns and tutorials, then my membership is the place to be. I hope you have a beautiful day. Until then, bye.